All right, Liz, ready to dive into those cross-country notes of yours? It looks like you're planning quite the adventure. 5 states: Connecticut, Kentucky, Louisiana, Nevada, and New York. And judging by your notes, you are all about the culture, the history, the food, the music, the landmarks. So let's break it down, see what makes each of these states unique. Shall we start with Connecticut?
Sounds good to me. Connecticut's a great place to start.
Yeah. I always kind of pictured Connecticut as, those picturesque New England towns and, fall foliage, all that. But then in your notes, I saw Constitution State. What's that all about?
Ah, that nickname. That gives you a little hint about Connecticut's role in shaping American democracy. Even way back in the 1600s, you highlighted the Fundamental Orders of 1638-39, right? Well, those were basically the blueprint for self-governance,
Yeah.
way before the U.S. Constitution.
So Connecticut was like a test run for democracy before the main event.
Pretty much. They came up with ideas like electing representatives and limiting the power of government. Might seem obvious now, but back then, pretty radical stuff. And guess what? Those ideas, well, they spread. When the Founding Fathers were working on the Constitution over a century later, they borrowed a lot from Connecticut's playbook. It's like Connecticut planted the seeds for American democracy.
Wow. Never knew Connecticut had such a rebellious streak.
There's more to it than that. The Fundamental Orders, well, they were a product of their time. They reflected the colonists' needs and values. They wanted control, separate from the British crown. That independent spirit, that desire for self-determination, it's a big part of Connecticut's identity.
Makes sense. And speaking of unique identity, your notes mention some, interesting food choices. New Haven-style pizza with white clam toppings, steamed cheeseburgers. Not exactly your typical New England clam chowder.
You're telling me it's like this contradiction, this traditional New England state, but with a taste for something different. But then again, maybe it's not that surprising when you think about Connecticut's history with industry. Cities like Hartford and Bridgeport were hubs for invention and manufacturing. That practical, hardworking spirit, that willingness to experiment, it kind of shows up in their food, too.
You're saying there's a link between building steam engines and steaming cheeseburgers.
Well, maybe not a direct link, but there's a boldness to both, It's like we're not afraid to try new things, push the boundaries a little, even if it raises a few eyebrows.
I'm sold. Steamed cheeseburger is officially on my to-eat list when I visit Connecticut. But before we get sidetracked by food, let's talk about literature. Mark Twain and Harriet Beecher Stowe both lived and wrote in Hartford, right?
Yeah. Hartford in the 19th century, it was buzzing with intellectual and artistic energy. Mark Twain, with his sharp wit and social commentary, and Harriet Beecher Stowe, her novel Uncle Tom's Cabin, really fueled the abolitionist movement. They both helped shape the national conversation.
So Connecticut was like a 19th century Silicon Valley, attracting innovators, not just in tech, but in ideas, too.
That's a great way to put it. Just like today, those innovators were drawn to a place where they could be creative, challenge the status quo. It's not a coincidence that both Twain and Stowe chose Hartford as their home.
All right, Connecticut is officially on my must-visit list. But for now, Liz, let's head south to Kentucky, because your notes have me picturing rolling hills, horses, and moonshine.
Sounds like you're ready for a taste of the bluegrass state. Kentucky is all about Southern traditions. Hospitality, storytelling, a deep connection to the land.
And horses, of course. You can't talk about Kentucky without mentioning the Kentucky Derby. That was highlighted in your notes.
For sure. The Derby is way more than a horse race. It's a cultural phenomenon. Elegance, Southern tradition, the excitement of competition, it's all there. People come from all over the world, from all walks of life, just to be a part of it.
Sounds like the kind of event where everyone gets all dressed up. Big hats, fancy suits, mint juleps probably.
You got it. It's about seeing and being seen, celebrating Southern heritage, maybe indulging in a little extravagance. But the Kentucky Derby is also about something deeper, I think. It's a symbol of Kentucky's identity, its connection to the land, to horses, its place in American history.
Speaking of Kentucky's identity, you also have My Old Kentucky Home in your notes. That's the state song, right?
Yes. It's a good example of how music can, evoke a sense of place and nostalgia. But it's important to remember that the song paints a pretty romanticized picture of plantation life. It doesn't really address the harsh realities of slavery and the complex history of the South.
Right, good point. It's a reminder to look deeper, to consider the different perspectives that shaped a place's history. But, you also mentioned moonshine legacy, and that seems pretty romanticized too, right? Was moonshine really that influential on Kentucky culture?
Yeah. It might seem like just a stereotype, But moonshine is a big part of Kentucky's past, especially in Appalachia. Think about it. The mountains, limited resources, a strong sense of independence. Moonshine wasn't just a drink, it was a way of life, a symbol of resourcefulness, and sometimes even rebellion.
So it's like a symbol of that Kentucky independent spirit,
Yeah.
but with a bit of an edge.
Exactly. And that spirit comes through in Kentucky's music, too. Bluegrass, country, Appalachian folk. These genres tell stories of hardship, resilience, a deep connection to the land and its people. You even mentioned Loretta Lynn and Tyler Childers, both amazing examples of Kentucky's musical legacy.
They do both have that raw, authentic sound that just feels so Kentucky. And their music is so different, yet it all feels distinctly Kentucky.
It's the beauty of Kentucky's musical landscape, I think. It's a blend of so many influences, each reflecting a different part of the state's complex identity.
Okay, Kentucky is definitely moving up my list. But for now, Liz, let's trade those bluegrass melodies for the sounds of jazz and Zydeco. We're heading down to Louisiana. And your notes, they're overflowing with Mardi Gras beads and beignets.
Get ready, Liz, because Louisiana is a sensory overload in the best way possible.
Oh, I am so ready. Let's start with Mardi Gras. Parades, beads, masks. Sounds like a giant party.
It's more than just a party, Liz. Mardi Gras is a celebration, deeply rooted in history and tradition, a time for letting loose, embracing the joy of life, and experiencing something you won't find anywhere else in the U.S.
So it's like a giant street party with historical significance. I'm in. Your notes also mention gumbo, jambalaya, etouffee, beignets. My mouth is already watering. Is the food as vibrant as the Mardi Gras celebrations?
Absolutely. Louisiana's cuisine reflects its diverse heritage. French, Spanish, African, Native American influences all blended together. It's bold, it's flavorful, and you won't find anything like it anywhere else.
And we can't forget about Tabasco sauce. You specifically mentioned Avery Island. What's so special about that place?
Avery Island is this really interesting geological formation, a salt dome rising right out of the Louisiana marshes, home to the Tabasco factory, of course. But it's also a testament to the unique relationship between nature and human ingenuity in Louisiana. You've got lush gardens, exotic bird sanctuaries, all right next to this spicy sauce empire.
Okay, Louisiana is definitely calling my name. But for now, Liz, we're going west to Nevada. Now, your notes, they have me wondering, how can the glitz and glamour of Las Vegas coexist with something like Burning Man out in the middle of the desert?
Ah, Nevada, the land of contradictions, a state of extremes.
You've got the neon spectacle of Vegas, this city that, defies all logic. And then, not too far away, you have the Black Rock Desert and Burning Man.
Right. It's wild. Two totally different worlds, same state.
And Liz, your notes, they really capture that duality. On one page, Frank Sinatra and the Rat Pack. On the next, Panic at the Disco. Talk about a musical mix.
That's Nevada for you. This clash of different times, different styles, Sinatra, the Rat Pack, that's that classic Vegas, all that glamour, the golden age of entertainment. But Vegas has always been about, reinventing itself, attracting new crowds, new sounds, new experiences, bands like Panic. At the Disco, they prove that Vegas is still a magnet for musicians, but the vibe, it's definitely shifted.
So it's not just casinos and shows anymore.
Vegas is still the entertainment capital, for sure, but it's more than that now. It's art, culture, you name it, world-class museums, galleries, performance venues, and the food scene. Forget about it. Celebrity chefs, Michelin star restaurants, you can find anything in Vegas.
You mentioned food Basque cuisine was in your notes, Liz. That's not something I would have pictured in Nevada.
It's a hidden gem. It's unexpected, right? You wouldn't think Nevada would have a connection to the Basque country over in Europe. But Basque immigrants, a lot of them sheep herders, they came to Nevada in the late 1800s, brought their food traditions with them.
So it's like a taste of Europe, hidden away in the Nevada desert.
Exactly. And it just shows you the layers of history and culture you find in Nevada. The glitz, the Wild West, the Native American heritage, and then tucked away these little pockets of Europe. It's pretty amazing.
Nevada's going on the list for sure. But for now, Liz, let's jump on a plane and head to the last stop on your cross-country research trip. New York. I mean, everyone knows New York from movies and TV, but what makes it truly special, beyond the stereotypes?
New York is in a category of its own. It's a global center, this cultural melting pot, a city that never sleeps, they say. It's been romanticized, sure, but the reality is even more interesting.
So what's the real New York experience?
It's the energy, the diversity, the constant motion. You walk down the street, you hear a dozen different languages. You find amazing little restaurants tucked away in unexpected places. It's feeling the pulse of a city that's always changing, always pushing boundaries.
You've got the Empire State Building, Central Park, The Brooklyn Bridge, the Statue of Liberty, those are all in your notes, Liz. But if you had to pick one thing that sums up New York, what would it be?
The people, for sure. New Yorkers are unique, resilient, resourceful, independent. They come from all over, all walks of life, and they've created this incredible mix of cultures, of perspectives. It's amazing.
It sounds like a city where you could spend your whole life and still only see a fraction of it.
Exactly. That's what makes it so exciting. Every neighborhood has its own character, its own stories. You could spend a week just exploring all the different food scenes, street vendors, fancy restaurants, everything in between.
Speaking of food, Liz, you mentioned foldable pizza, bagels with lox, street food. Sounds like the classic New York food experience.
It's that grab-and-go lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
New Yorkers are always on the move, and the food reflects that. Fold that pizza, slice in half, grab a bagel, you're good to go. It fuels the city's energy.
I'm getting hungry just thinking about it. But it's not just the food, right? You mentioned some history and culture stuff, too.
You're right. New York has such a rich history, from its colonial days to its role as a gateway for immigrants. Ellis Island, that's where millions of people first set foot in America, dreaming of a better life. And then you have the Tenement Museum. It tells the stories of immigrant families living in those crowded buildings, tough conditions, but they still built lives for themselves, for their kids.
A reminder that New York's story, it's one of both success and struggle.
Absolutely. That's what makes the city so compelling. You have these towering skyscrapers, bustling streets, but also poverty, inequality. It's a city of contradictions, constantly changing, trying to figure out its own identity.
So, Liz, you've got a lot to unpack as you explore New York.
Definitely. But I think you're more than ready.
We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? From Connecticut to Vegas, from bluegrass to, well, the melting pot of New York City.
It really is incredible the amount of cultural and historical diversity we have, all within one country.
And we've just scratched the surface. I bet your notes, Liz, are full of even more fascinating details and hidden gems.
I think it's time to connect the dots, to step back, see the bigger picture, see if we can find those unexpected links that tie these seemingly different states together.
Okay, I'm all about those aha moments. Let's do it. We've explored each state on its own, but now, let's zoom out a bit, see the bigger picture. What connects these places, what threads run through them, even though they seem so different.
It's interesting, when you think about Connecticut and Kentucky, on the surface, they're worlds apart.
Right. Connecticut, you
Yeah.
think tradition, New England, that kind of reserved vibe. And Kentucky, that's the heart of the South. Warm, welcoming, but also a little bit rebellious, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. But they both played such important roles in shaping, what it means to be American. Connecticut with those fundamental orders, and Kentucky as a border state during the Civil War. That was a time when the whole country was wrestling with the issue of slavery, almost tore the nation in two.
And those struggles, they still resonate today, don't they? I mean, we're still figuring out the balance of power between states and the federal government.
Yeah.
And we're still dealing with the legacy of slavery and its impact on our society.
It shows that history isn't just about memorizing dates and names. It's about understanding the forces that shaped where we are today and where we're headed. And speaking of influences, Liz, your notes on food really got me thinking about how much regional cuisines reflect the mix of cultures that we have in America.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we talked about Connecticut's adventurous side with those steamed cheeseburgers. And Louisiana, that's a melting pot of flavors right there. Gumbo, jambalaya, beignets. Oh, and those Basque restaurants in Nevada. Who knew?
Each of those culinary traditions, they tell a story about the people who settled in those areas, the ingredients they used, how they adapted their cooking to this new environment. Connecticut's industrial boom, it drew people from all over, so you get this fusion of influences. Louisiana, that's French, Spanish, African, Native American, all mixed together. And the Basque restaurants in Nevada, that's a reminder of those sheep herders who came from the mountains of Europe to the American West, and they brought their food with them.
It's like every dish is a time capsule. It holds a piece of the region's history and culture.
Exactly. When you travel, Liz, you're not just tasting food, you're tasting history.
Okay, I'm officially a culinary historian now.
Yeah.
But it's not just about food. You also highlighted those iconic landmarks, right? But I think we've discovered that the real treasures are often found off the beaten path.
Right. It's about finding those hidden gems, those places that really capture the spirit of a place. Like in Connecticut, those steamboat tours along the Connecticut River, they give you a glimpse into the past, and the natural beauty of the area. Kentucky, their mountain music festivals, they celebrate the heart of Appalachia, the storytelling, the community, those authentic sounds that have inspired musicians for generations.
And in New York City, it's about exploring those neighborhoods, each with its own unique vibe, its own cultural blend.
You got it. It's those unplanned moments, the little discoveries you make that stay with you that really help you understand a place.
Let's go back to Nevada for a second. Liz, you pointed out this really stark contrast between, well, the spectacle of Vegas, right, all the lights and casinos, and then Burning Man, which is all about like this alternative, almost utopian community.
Yep.
How can those two things exist in the same state?
It's because Nevada embraces those extremes. Vegas, that's the American dream in all its glitz and, well, excess, right? Anything goes. But Burning Man, that's about escaping those norms, expressing yourself, building a community.
It's like two sides of the same coin, the desire for indulgence and the desire for escape, both very much a part of, well, the American spirit, I guess.
And it's not just Nevada. We see these contradictions all over the country. Think about New York City. Never sleeps, always bustling, the center of finance, fashion, culture. But it's also a place dealing with huge issues, inequality, social injustice. It's a complicated picture.
It reminds us that America is this, well, this complex, often contradictory country, always trying to live up to its ideals, even when it falls short.
Yeah, it is. And as you travel, Liz, you'll see those contradictions firsthand. The good and the bad, the achievements and the struggles, it's all part of the story.
So what does all this mean for Liz as she gets ready for her big adventure?
I think it means going into each state with an open mind, being curious. Embrace the unexpected. Listen to people's stories. Take it all in, the unique flavors, the experiences. That's what makes it so rewarding.
It's not just about checking things off a list. It's about really immersing yourself in the culture, the history, the stories of the people who make America so interesting.
Exactly. It's about understanding that America isn't just one thing. It's this huge, rich tapestry made up of so many different threads. Each state, each region, each community adds its own color, its own texture to the whole picture.
Well, Liz, I hope this deep dive has given you a better understanding of these 5 amazing states and maybe even inspired you to explore even more.
Remember, keep your mind open, expect the unexpected, and most importantly, have fun.
And everyone listening, keep exploring, keep learning, keep challenging your own perspectives. Until next time, keep diving deep.